Hello and welcome to Mtoto News Insights, this week brought to you by Omar Hamid. But first, let's have a look at the headlines today. Do parents have positive sex talks with their children?
Lazima nimwambie asicheze na wasichana, sababu akicheza na wasichana kuna hili na kuna moja mbili tatu. Political manifestos and children.
Wazazi wengi ni mambo ya wenye wamesema mambo ya kupanda bangi imepotesha watoto wetu, na kama watakubali watu wapande hiyo bangi yenye wanasema hiyo bangi, wawe na rehab ya kupeleka ya watoto ya bure, kwa sababu watoto wengi watakwisha.
Social media influence on children.
Social media has quickly turned and showed us its negative side, with one of its negative effects being cyberbullying, which happens.
On to our first news story. The latest study by the Ministry of Health shows that 1 in every 5 adolescents aged 15 to 19 is pregnant with a child or already a mother. Due to this rapid surge in cases, Kenya ranks the third globally in teenage pregnancies and have an average of 98 HIV infections among adolescents recorded weekly in the last year. The Ministry of Health says that HIV and AIDS remains a major public health threat for adolescents and young people. Mtoto News got a chance to interview some of the parents and get their views on whether or not they engage their children on this matter. Take a look.
The sex talk, the first introduction of sex to children and also considered one of the greatest taboos to the African community. The debate on whether or not parents should be having the sex talk has been going on since the beginning of westernization in Africa. Questions like, is it important? How do we have it? Is it a solution or a problem itself? Have been asked by many African parents who also have argued that it goes against the norms of the African people. Research, however, has proved that parents who introduce sex and sexuality to their children are able to minimize the risk of their children getting misinformation and myths about sex from the outside world. Children who have the sex talk with their parents are more informed and thus can be considered safer than those who do not have the sex talk with their parents. Another benefit of the sex talk is that it creates a bond of trust between the child and parent and makes it easier for the child to approach the parent whenever they have questions relating to their sexuality.
Do you have like sex education with your children?
Yes, I do.
About having sex education, unawaimiza nini, especially mnazungumza nini na unawaimiza nini, waepe nini, wafanye nini?
Kama saizi unaambia mtoto ukifanya hivi utapata result hizi, unaona? Kama ukihave sex na mtoto mwingine unaweza pata magonjwa, early pregnancy, drop out from the school. Sasa hiyo itakuwa successful in life. So I try to abstain. Juu life saizi vile iko, saizi life ni hard. Watu wamekuwa wakitumia mihadarati. Sasa unapata peer pressure ndio inafanya watoto wengi wanapata kupotea. Sasa lazima uwaeleze the result. Ukifanya hivi, what is the consequence? Sasa hiyo lazima nimueleze. Unajua kama wana wakusikia atasikia, kama si wakusikia atapotea tu.
Yani unaambia tu mtoto, kama mimi niko na kijana, unaona, lazima nimwambie asicheze na wasichana, sababu akicheza na wasichana kuna hili na kuna moja mbili tatu, sawa? Sasa nikimwambia hivyo, nimwambie utakuwa kuna umri akifika akiwa mkubwa, ataona hao wasichana, lakini sisi sasa hivi akiwa shuleni, unaona? Hivyo ndo namwambia.
Ukizungumza unamuelezea ku abstain, kumongelesha hivyo. Pengine kuna mtoto ambaye ana uhusiano mzuri na mama yake na amekosa haya maarifa. Pengine utampea ujumbe upi?
Sasa shida yenye iko saizi, wazazi wengi tumeingia kwa hizi peer pressure, you are drunkard, the things you are doing there. Sasa inakuwa hard for the most children to get this information. Juu kama mzazi anafanya hizi vituko, ukiwa mlevi huwezi kujicontrol. Sasa unaona, sasa watoto kama hao wenye wameangukia hiyo family, so unaona wanapata hizo challenges mob. Sasa sijui vile tutawasaidia juu tuseme huwezi vile tu saizi kuko, huwezi advise mtoto wa jirani. Juu mamake atasikia vibaya, mtaanza kukombana hapa na pale, sijui uliambia mtoto wangu nini. Lakini kwangu mimi najua challenges ziko na watoto. Lazima nisaidie watoto wangu so that they can grow.
Nawaambia yani wasikue uwaoga kwa watoto wao. Wakuwe huru kuwaambia watoto na wasiwaogope. Kwa sababu sasa hivi hakuna kitu ambacho watoto hawajui. Hata kama ni mtoto wa class 4, hakuna kitu hajui. Unaona? Kila kitu watoto wanajua. Sasa kusikue na uoga wa kuogopa kumwaelezea mtoto eti 1 2 3 ni mbaya na hii ni nzuri. Unaona? Kwa hiyo unakuwa huru kumuelezea mtoto kila kitu.
Walieka kiboko chini. Pale shuleni mwalimu anaongelesha watoto hawasikizi. Sasa ile program ingerudishwa ya kiboko kuguide, na pia walete guidance and counseling. Wanaambia watoto hivi, iko hivi na hivi. Sasa huyo mtoto atakuwa akijua vizuri na vibaya.
Mtoto hujampea pocket money vizuri kwa sababu maisha ni magumu. Ni ukweli. Unambania pesa kwa sababu haitoshi. Lazima ataenda kule adanganywe na vijana apate pesa ndo afiche. Akishaficha hii pesa ndo aende shuleni akiwa kama wale wenzake. Sasa serikali imepandisha vitu ni bei ghali, maisha yamekuwa magumu. Unaona? Inabidi yani vitu zingine zinachangia pia maisha kwa sababu maisha ni magumu.
Let me ask you this. Do parents engage their children on the sex talk and the methods of prevention from premarital sex? This forms the basis of our discussion later on. Now on to other news. During this election period, the presidential candidates have been releasing their different manifestos, informing the public of what they are to do once elected into office. But are they considering children's issues in their manifestos? And how are these manifestos going to affect the children of the country? Mtoto News collected views from parents around Nairobi concerning the release of the manifestos. Have a look. Throughout this election period, different presidential candidates have been releasing their manifestos, which in one way or the other affect both parents and children. Some of these manifestos, such as the legalization of bang, have brought about concerns to the parents, saying that it might urge some of the young people and adolescents to misuse the harmful drug. The issue made many parents to urge the next government not to allow certain substances, as some of the young people may misinterpret the main use of this substance.
Kuna hii manifesto imetolewa juzi na mtu anajiita Wajakoya. Hiyo sana ndio ninaona itaadhiri nchi yote na hata watoto wangu mimi kama mzazi. Juu sana naona inachafua mawazo ya watoto wetu. Wanaonelea sasa kama bagi ni kitu mzuri ya kuuza ama ya kukuza. Hiyo sana mimi ndio naona inanidhuru na hata inadhuru hata watoto wangu.
Kitu yenye imefinyiria wazazi wengi ni mambo ya wenye wamesema mambo ya kupanda bangi, imepotesha watoto wetu. Na kama watakubali watu wapande hiyo bangi yenye wanasema hiyo bangi, wawe na rihabu ya kupeleka ya watoto ya bure, kwa sababu watoto wengi watakwisha.
Pengine ungeiangalia kwa manufaa ya kusaidia uchumi ama
ileto kitu ingine yenye inaweza kutusaidia, lakini mambo ya kumaliza watoto kama wakati huu ukienda ukiangalia kwa barabara, wasijana wengi si wasichana wa shule university wamekuwa wazimu ndio wengi. Sasa kuambua tena bangi pandwe ndio itatusaidia, hakuna kutusaidia, ni kumaliza watoto yetu.
Hizo manifesto wakitengeneza ni lazima watuelekeze. Sisi ndio tunawaajiri, sisi ndio tunawapea kazi. Sasa lazima watuangalie sisi na watoto wetu watasoma aje, watakula aje, watapata good health aje, wakigojeka ni aje, wametupanga mahospitali hivyo.
Over the past few years, we have witnessed an increase in the use of social media platforms, especially among children. In our next story, our journalist Brian King tells us more on the positive and negative effects of social media and how to keep children safe when using these platforms.
Over the past few years, social media platforms like WhatsApp, TikTok, and Facebook have grown quite rapidly. Now, with children being among the main consumers, join me, Brian King, as I take you through the negative effects of social media. Although considered a tool, social media has quickly turned and showed us its negative side, with one of its negative effects being cyberbullying, which happens to take a toll on children's psychological well-being, which in turn leads to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and even in some cases, suicide. Also, because of children's tendency to overshare their personal details and information, social media platforms leave them vulnerable to attacks by scammers, hackers, and predators, thus compromising their general safety and well-being. Another very major negative effect of social media is the addiction to the internet, which in most cases, the use of social media by children, especially if it's unmonitored, leads to internet addiction, which in turn tends to affect their general health well-being, with eyesight being recorded as the main negative health effect of overuse of social media. Although it is true that social media platforms do have a lot of negative effects, they do also have some positive impacts, and it is up to you, the user, to determine which ones you're going to experience. Reporting from Mtoto News Insights, I am Brian King.
At this point in time, we take a short break, but don't go too far. We still have that discussion on the sex talk, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Mtoto News Insights. Before we took a break, I had highlighted on the interesting topic that we're to discuss right now about the sex talk. I know Brian is already smiling. Anyway, so I'm going to let my panel to introduce themselves, and then we will start. Let me start with you.
Hello everybody, my name is Brian King. I am a child representative of the Pan-African Child-Led Organization, as well as a trained journalist here at Mtoto News.
Thank you so much, Brian. Let's move on. A very new face at Mtoto News Insights.
Hi, my name is Al-Amin Ahmed. I'm one of the trained journalists at Mtoto News, and as well as a leader at Kenya Children Assembly.
Thank you so much, Al-Amin. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sheila Luangu, a trained journalist at Mtoto News.
Thank you so much. Now, Sheila, let me just start with you. A while back, we had a discussion about sex education, and today we're having a discussion on the sex talk. Now, tell us, what is the sex talk?
Basically, what I understand about sex talk is maybe the adults trying to create awareness about use a word to describe a word about sex.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Sheila. Let's move on to Al-Amin. Al-Amin, a very young age.
Yeah.
Very young. What is the sex talk?
Well, I don't quite know what a sex talk is.
we are coming to that. Thank you so much. Okay, Brian, let me ask you now, what is the sex talk?
Okay, Omar, for me, the definition of a sex talk might vary with each different person, but I believe for me it is the first introduction of, reproduction to children.
Okay.
Where I told you where babies come from, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. Now let me start with you. Has your parent ever engaged you in now what we call the sex talk?
I would not.
And if they did, how was it?
Okay, I would love to say no, but then again, she kind of did.
Okay.
Well, I guess she told me I came from a supermarket. So yes, that was the sex talk I got. So yeah, I came from a supermarket. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. Let's move on to Al-Amin. Al-Amin, very young age. You just entered adolescent, I know.
Yeah.
Now, has your parent ever engaged you in the sex talk?
Well, it was indirectly, just before I actually learned where babies actually come from. I was told.
Did they tell you the truth where they come from?
No, at that time I was a bit young, so they told me they come from rainbows where leprechauns bring you.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, now let me come to you, Sheila. Sheila, does your parent engage you in the sex talk?
In one way or the other, let me just say no.
Okay.
Yes, because like the sex talk I was engaged in, I was told nilitoka kwa ndege, like I came from the aeroplane. So that is the sex talk I know. I've ever had with my parent.
Okay, so they usually tell you dropped from the aeroplane.
Like my mom was just sitting down, and then the aeroplane came, and I was just dropped down and onto his arm, and then I dropped, and that is how I became the child.
Fantastic. The truth our parents tell us. Let's move on to now, Al-Amin, do you think you should be involved now in the sex talk?
Well, I don't think I should be anymore, at least.
Why? Because
I already know where babies actually come from. So I don't see any reason that they should engage me. But if it's necessary, then I shall be involved.
Okay, let's move on to Brian. Brian, goja kwanza. You see, Brian, your young brother over here, very young, 13 years old, saying he should not be involved in the sex talk. Kwanza, let's define what is sex. Yes. Brad, you're basically 17. Tell us what is sex.
Okay, scientifically, sex is also known as coitus. It is the engagement of two individuals for reproductory purposes. Okay. Yes, I will not go into further details, but I just want to correct him on something. I understand how awkward and weird that conversation can be, right? I mean, just imagine you and your dad or mom just yeah, it gets weird and all. But now, what is the importance of the sex talk actually? I mean, you're saying you don't need to be engaged in the sex talk anymore because you know where babies come from. Yes. But I'm telling you, there's a lot to learn. There is a lot to learn on the sex talk is actually quite
broad.
It's so broad, and it needs to happen later, because I mean, where did you learn that from?
School.
Okay, yeah, school. I guess I forgot about school, but I mean, if parents don't engage their children on such, other people will.
That actually,
people like Alamin here who think they know enough, and that's the problem.
That actually brings me to the next question. Now that you still have the mic, do you think now parents should engage their children on the sex talk?
Yes, definitely, absolutely, totally. Parents should definitely engage their children in sex talk, and the reasons are very vast actually, and very. I don't want to encroach on our cultural norms where sex is actually considered a sacred or taboo topic. But it's happening, right? The internet is there, and we know what is in there. We have people out there who think they actually know what it is, and so basically what I'm trying to say is if you don't teach your children, if you don't talk to them about sex, someone else will, or something else in terms of the computer, right? And what they will hear from there, or what they will learn from there, is definitely not what you want them to learn. And as we were talking about sex education the other day, right? It needs to start at home. You need to tell your children what it is. I mean, of course, there's a ripe age. There's an age where they'll actually understand this age, this Alamania, right? I mean, don't let them get to our age before actually getting engaged in what is sex. Why should we not engage in it, right? I mean, if in school they were taught what is sex and methods of abstaining from sex, right? But now, if you teach them methods of abstaining without actually telling them why they are abstaining, then you're kind of losing out on the purpose.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brian. Let me come to Sheila now. Let's get this from a girl's perspective. Now, Sheila.
Yes.
There's this girl. I'm not saying that I know the girl, but there's this girl there's this girl we have. Let's give her a name by the name Laura. We have this girl Laura. Laura has never been engaged in the sex talk ever before by the parents, maybe not the teachers. And then Laura goes to the maybe estate yao, in their estate, and then Laura finds this very attractive, cute boy like Omar, for example. And then this boy Omar goes with Laura, and then Omar knows about sex and all that stuff, and then they engage in now what we call coitus or sex. Is it Laura's fault that she engaged in sex when she did not even know about it?
Okay, thank you so much, Omar. I'll start by saying my mom, in one way or the other, I didn't really quite get what I wanted to get about sex talk, but I'm very grateful to the organization called Dreams. I've really learned a lot about sex talk and how to abstain and all about sex education. Second, back to your question is, Laura will say, I wish I knew. If the person had the awareness, the education about, like he had the skills, the knowledge about sex, he could know she could know how to go about it. There is a use of protection, right? Use of whatever means the girl will try to use, but at least angejua angekuwa na engage hapo. So I think the blame is not to her, but somehow it's to her, because she had the chance to say no, but
she doesn't
know about sex, but you have just principles that guide you. So we shouldn't just say, because I don't know anything about sex talk, now I engaged in it, but we have principles. On the other hand, the blame is to the parent, because if the parent had the acquisition, had made the girl to be aware of sex and all that, the girl wouldn't end up in that situation, because there are so many girls right now who are watching us. They're saying like, oh my goodness, I wish I knew about this. I couldn't have done this. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for those inputs. Now let me come to you, Alamin. Alamin, I understand you're in primary school, and you know that age of 14 years, you're usually at the peak of adolescence, and maybe not necessarily by the parents to introduce the sex talk, but do you think the sex talk should be introduced to maybe in school by teachers, hearing what Brian has told you about how important it is?
Now I feel that I'm just wrong. After hearing what Brian and Sheila have said, I'm like, I regret. But hearing from Brian and Sheila, now I do think it is necessary that even if the sex talk isn't going to be introduced by the parents, it should be at least introduced by the teachers at school. Honestly, I think for me, I'm still in the 844 system. So when I was in class 6, otherwise nowadays known as grade 6, I was already introduced into like sexual activities, not in the way that you think, but we were taught about sex. And the sex organs and everything else.
Okay.
So we were told.
And were you guys told what they do?
What does
the sex organs they do?
So
and were you told on methods on how to abstain?
Yes.
All
so
that?
Okay, on the part of how we were taught, yes, we were taught on how it happens, and then we were also taught about how to abstain.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Alamin, for those inputs. I actually feel like if the teacher is teaching and maybe the teacher is also afraid, you see, now that's also another problem. And sometimes the teachers can just teach you and they don't tell you how to abstain from all that situation. So let me come to you, Brian. Brian, I don't know if you've seen the latest statistics. Do you know they suggest that Kenya is ranked number 3 for children underage having teenage pregnancies, and we are also at among the countries that have the highest rate of HIV infections in young people. What do you think you can tell that young person, that child at home, to abstain from all this?
Before I go that, those statistics are very actually weird, right? I mean, considering you're also ranked among the top countries when it comes to protecting the girl child, right? Now, where is the problem? The parents, sex talk, you see. I mean, we're not actually utilizing our time with children. We're not talking to them about, the important stuff, the things that we should actually be talking about. Mom comes at home and the first question is, Mwasha vyombo? Okay. And that's it. That's the conversation you're having, right? I can tell you to abstain as much as possible, and we all know you won't listen. So, I think that the positive thing to say is, have someone to talk to. We always say this when it comes to mental health, but having someone to talk to even in such a case is actually very important. And I am an advocate for use of contraceptives. You know why? Because if you're not going to listen, then be protected, right? I think for me, use contraceptives. But to parents, talk to your children. If you don't, I will, and trust me, don't want to be doing that. And I'm not saying me in literal form, I'm saying me as a stranger. If you don't do it, someone else will, and I'm pretty sure you don't want them to be exposed to what that someone else is saying. So you better do it.
Thank you so much, Brian. Brian, with those few remarks, we are taking a short break at Mtoto News Insights, but don't go too far. We're still coming back with more. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Mtoto News Insights. Before we took a break, we were continuing with the discussion about the sex talk. Let me come back to you, Sheila, before we come back again now this way. Now, Sheila,
yes,
you've also seen the statistics, I'm sure, here at Mtoto News about the teenage pregnancies going way up, and also the increased infections for HIV and AIDS. And then there's this issue which used to happen. I'm not advocating for it, but I want to get your suggestions since you're as children. Kitambo, child marriage, when like from 16, 17, 18, and maybe 17 and 18 and 19 and 20 from there. Do you think that if the introduction of early marriage, not child marriage, early marriage, like being married like when early, will decrease this number of HIV infections for one, because it means that the person is just like that, and then maybe decrease the number or the range of teen pregnancies?
Thank you so much, Omar. I'd like to start with the first question about the statistics that shows Kenya is ranked number 3 worldwide of early teenage pregnancies. You see, the fact is, why is it that in low income areas or in slums, like those living standards are very low, there is where you will find these girls are selling, you see, exchange of money. You sleep with me, you give me money, and that money will cater for 1, 2, 3, 4. Why don't we find the root problems of these early teenage pregnancies instead of just advocating of it? You see, as much as we are speaking about sex talk, maybe it's about sex talk, and there is lack of proper low income living standards are very low, so we are not helping it. As much as you'll be aware, you're like I'm very aware of sex talk, but I really need this, I really need enough food, I really need to get this, but I don't have. Why don't we set organizations that will help these girls at least acquire what they need, instead of them selling themselves only to have children at an early stage, whereby it's risky. Coming to a second point about if we should advocate for early marriage, the answer is no, because as much as we are advocating for it, you see, the population is growing, and as much as we'll advocate for it, it's not like we are going to advocate for it and then support the local farmer, agricultural producers. There's going to be the population is going to be high, and there's going to be high demand of food, and this now we'll be just encouraging early teenage pregnancies. That is because many girls will tend to say, see, the law says we should get married at 16 years. Right now, you can imagine I would have had 3 kids right now. We are talking and I'm like, mom, that is just very bad. We're not advocating for no, we shouldn't advocate for early teenage marriage, early marriage.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sheila, for your views on that. Let me come to Alamin Ahmed. Alamin, 2 children are found to be in what the children of these days now you call relationships. Maybe a girl who's 16 and a boy who's 17, like Brian King here. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's their fault if they never had the sex talk?
I don't think it is their fault if they've never heard of the sex talk, but being in a relationship doesn't mean you necessarily have to know about the sex talk, because relationships they may vary, right? There might be friendship relationships, and then there might be boyfriend and girlfriend relationships, and then there might be marriage relationships. So if in turn, if they're actually dating, or perhaps they're just friends, I don't think it would matter that much if they didn't know about the sex talk.
Thank you so much, Alan. Let me come to you, Brian. Now, Brian, actually, I'm just asking you the same question. There's this issue of now relationships between this boyfriend and girlfriend thing. Is it something good, or is it something totally bad and should not be practiced by any children?
I think the parents in the room want me to say it is totally bad and it should not be practiced by children. Okay. Right, but let's speak the truth. Kwa ground vitu zikoaje. You see, almost every child.
Tell me what the ground is.
That's what I'm trying to say. Almost every child I know is. Let me not say almost every person I know is in a relationship, and you know why? I believe in the adolescent stage. Humans, or simply children, are just really want human connection, right?
Okay. Let me, before you continue, Brian. In the traditional African society, it was believed that you are supposed to only be in search when you are ready for marriage, at around 20 something, or maybe you're supposed to be in search maybe for marriage. So do you think children, or not, because children, I know that children under the age of 12, that does not happen. It usually happens from 14, 15, 16 there.
Yeah, let's believe that.
Let's talk about that. Do you think they've resorted to these relationships boyfriend and girlfriend because of lacking things like the sex talk and at-home sex education?
First of all, I just have to acknowledge the beauty of our old culture, right?
Yeah.
There's some aspects we just had to love, right? But the youth and the youth not being allowed to date is definitely not one of them. And you know why? Because me personally, I believe dating is more of just getting to connect, getting to learn, right? Because in the past, as you said, it was all about the man commanding the room, right? So there was no need to learn about partnership. There was no need to learn about compromise, because it was always man says what happens or woman says what happens in matriarchal communities, right? Now in our current age, it's marriage is a form of partnership. And so in partnerships, you have to learn how to compromise and how to accept different facts and how to accept people as they are. That's why I believe dating is important, right? I mean, dating is, according to me, is very good, you see, except you just have to be guided.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. Asante sana for your views. Let me come to Sheila. Sheila.
Yes.
Now, Agina Brian have spoken quite comprehensively. Now, what is your view about children or necessarily teens? That's a perfect word. Teens being in early relationships, and do you think it's something that should be abolished?
Okay, I'll go with what everyone has said, starting with Alamin and Brian. But the point here is, what are you doing in that relationship? You won't tell me your boyfriend is assisting you with your homework. That is that is just a lie. You're not talking lies. Parents in the room, you agree with me, right? You're not saying that Mtoto pale you're having a boyfriend and you're talking about education, right? So I don't see it as bad. Is what you're doing in that relationship that matters a lot. And you see, like the way you said, in traditional African society, they valued chastity.
Chastity.
Yeah,
thank you.
They valued that word. You see, like it's very heavy. You have to stay like until you are married. Like when you are that man, it's called platonic love. I think something like that. You have just to find the guy and then get married. You're not supposed to engage in that. But when we have this sex talk, I think it would be very important. If you're a girl, if you're a boy, if you're a teen listening to us right now, is what you do in that relationship matters a lot. And if you're supposed to engage in that relationship, I'll just tell you no. Just have principles. There are so many things you can engage in just to avoid being in a girl-boy relationship. After all, we are all humans. There are times, and we are just adolescents, There are times when we cannot control our feelings. What happens? Do you want to be a mother? Do you want to be called a father at 15 years? Do you want to be called a mother at 16 years? For me, I'll go with chastity and principles that guide us. I'm not saying for those who have boyfriends and girlfriends it's wrong, but that's just my view.
Thank you so much, Sheila. The show is called Let's Talk About It. I think you can see it's all about collecting children's views. None of this is actually what we are putting in place, okay? Alamin now.
Yeah.
Do you think now sex talk should be introduced in class by the government? Because other than the normal, female reproductive system, the male reproductive system, the pregnancy, process, and also in high school we have the menstruation process. Do you think the sex talk should be introduced in class?
Just before I answer your question, I'd like to say that these relationships are not normally in only teens. They're also in people who are below probably, the age that I've seen children dating, especially at my estate, is like 10 years going up.
Currently, we are talking about how the ground is, yes?
Yeah. So it's normally 10 years going up. So don't like usiwaingilie ma teenagers sana.
Okay.
So
I'm actually just taking your view.
Yeah. So about that question on sex talk being introduced into schools, with the current system, the new system, CBC system, they aren't taught about sexual education at the normal class like I was taught in grade 6. They'll be learning future in like junior secondary, somewhere between form like class 8, class 7, class 8, form 7, form 8. So between there is where now they'll be taught about these things collectively. So right now, I think, on my opinion, I think they should introduce sex talks in school, especially to those younger children at the CBC system.
Thank you so much, Alamin. Now let me come to you, Brian. Now, Brian, you've mentioned about you saying that dating is in teens is not something that is not necessarily bad. It can actually mean understanding each other and getting to know more about each other and understanding your sexuality also. So, now I want you to advise that teen out there who is also maybe could be in a relationship, and how they can also get to abstain from early pregnancies, can also abstain from this HIV and the STDs.
Thank you. First of all, I think I have to acknowledge Sheila's remarks. They were deep and conk. I think they are the kind of remarks we tend to hear a lot. Sheila? Yeah. And they're so nice, right? You need to have principles and all. And I have to first of all make sure that I'm not advocating for you guys to have sex early. My friends, wait. But now I just have to now go into my remarks, what I said earlier, right? Abstinence and contraception, right? Why does the line cross? Because I understand that some teens actually tend to, if you're told abstain and abstain and abstain, and you're not able to do that, there's another option called contraceptives, right? But I mean, all in all, yeah, it is true. Abstinence is better.
Yeah.
It's simpler, less complicated, and it's also preferred. But now, what about dating? What do I mean by dating actually? I mean, for me, dating is a kind of partnership, how you learn from each other, right? Alamin said there is different kind of relationships. There is the boyfriend and girlfriend. I believe that's the romantic one. There is the friendship relationship, and there is the marriage relationship. Oh, I don't want to talk about it.
We are way far from that.
Now, the boyfriend and girlfriend, right? That one is very defined, because I mean, if you're under 18, you're not supposed to be having sex, right? So there it is. If you're a teenager, all I can tell you, by the way, is as simple as yourself. If dating will mean you're going to have sex, kindly don't do it. Just stay with your friends. It's allowed. So no, yes, it is. Just be you, because I mean, you have to understand the consequences of your action, right? As Sheila said, you don't want to be a father or a mother at 15 years old. Yeah. Trust me, you don't. You can hardly buy your own shoes. You don't want to buy someone else's. So yes, my parting shot is simple. Know yourself, understand yourselves. And for parents, learn to talk to us about these things, right? If you don't, who will?
Asante sana, Brian. Let's move to Sheila as we get your parting shots too about sex talk. Do you think, now we're actually summing it up. Talk to that child who is at home, never had the sex talk. Do you think the child should maybe talk to someone about the sex talk? Because maybe he or she is feeling, there's that time you feel like you are sexually active. Thank you very much. Yes, sexually active.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much, Omar. I'd like to acknowledge what you asked, Alamin, and the government should engage sex talk in schools, and if not in schools, at least try to create NGOs, organizations that can do that. We have this non-governmental organization called Dreams. It's really doing well. If it was not for Dreams, trust me, I couldn't know anything about sex talk, sex education. So big up to Dreams. Back to your question. That girl who's at home listening to us right now, it's not too late yet. There's so many organizations. We have like Mtoto News, and we have Dreams, and many organizations that I don't know the names. If you cannot reach any of those, please try to have a good conversation. We have the GNC department at school, and there are books. There's a book I read about menstruation. It was really a good book. I liked the book because the way it portrayed. I wish if I had read the book first, I wouldn't be terrified seeing my monthly period. I'm saying this and the boys are here. I'm not afraid. Yeah, listen to it very careful. So you wouldn't be like, I wouldn't be afraid of it. Second thing, just have principles. You are sexually active. What does your principle tell you? Do you feel like having sex? Like I said before, do you want to become a mother? Brian has said you cannot buy your own shoes, so you cannot barely even buy a diaper. Please, just have principles that will guide you. Second, be yourself. Don't just be Sheila. Just because Sheila is dating, you want also to date. No, be yourself. Don't be driven by peer pressure, and try to find information as possible. Don't go to the wrong people. You can approach your mother just when you're happy, and when it's just come. It's just like, Mom, I want to know about this. Will you please try to explain it to me? If your mother is able to explain it to you, then well and good. If your mother is not, try to find it in school. We have GNC department, so that's what I can tell them. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Let's come to Alamin now. We have actually, we've gone so much. So Alamin, tell us now, what can you tell the NGOs, the government about, what they can do to help these children who are undergoing these challenges and need the sex talk?
Well, as you said, the government, the first measure that they can take is just before it even happens, you now engage this sex talk in schools. So you start off to the school, and then after the children learn about this sex talk, they'll now be able to go to their parents. And then after they go to the parents will now talk to them even more about the sex talk. So honestly, the first measure they can ever take is to first introduce sex talk into school. After schools is when now they can continue on, like, if it is able, they can make websites where they can create awareness about this, and even the parents themselves can learn to know about the sex talk if they don't know about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alamin. We have actually come to the end of Total News Insights. Bear in mind that your parents were watching, so whatever you said, kindly. But actually, we were collecting views from the child perspective. And thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to keep the conversation flowing about the sex talk on our social media platforms at Mtoto News, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find us at our website at www.mtotonews.com, and also at all social media platforms. You can find me at Omar Hemed 83. But for now, we say goodbye.